What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Bleeding BNG. To give you a timestamp as I do for all of my episodes, today is Sunday, May 25th, 2025. So it is Memorial Day weekend. So I want to shout out everybody that serves. Shout out to all the troops protecting this country, because I wouldn't be able to do this if you guys weren't fighting for our beloved country. And everybody celebrating the cookouts and everything. Enjoy yourselves. And yeah, let's turn up because we're getting closer and closer to football season. But before I get too deep into this video, you already know what I'm going to say. Be sure to comment, be sure to like, and be sure to subscribe. On the road to 3,000 subscribers, and I can't do it without your help. So go ahead and hit that notification button so you're not missing any of this content. Infiltrate the comments because I love cutting up with you guys in the comments, getting feedback, interactions, and things of that nature. So go ahead, infiltrate the comments, and without further ado, let's get into this video. So if you guys have checked out the title, and if you guys are checking out my YouTube video, you see I have the number 17 jersey on because number 17, our beloved Terry McLaurin, is the topic of today's episode, because the Washington Commanders, they have a Terry McLaurin issue on their hands. We're going to call it the Terry McLaurin saga. And if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, and if you haven't been too tapped into Washington Commander football, because we are getting closer and closer to the dog days of the NFL offseason. Well, Terry McLaurin missed the voluntary offseason workout session this past week. And that's something that he did in 2022 when he was vying for a new contract. It was reported by Jordan Schultz this past week that his absence was due to the contract negotiations and things of that nature. And as I said, this was something he did in 2022, so it isn't foreign to Terry McLaurin, but it's not too like him. When we talk about, wide receivers across the NFL, we talk about how all of them have those diva personalities and things of that nature. Well, Terry McLaurin isn't that guy, right? And he showed kind of like his first inkling, or even if you want to call it like a chink in the armor of not being Teflon perfect Renaissance man Terry McLaurin in 2022 when he sat out of that voluntary offseason workout session around 3 years ago to the date. But it did work out for him in the long run. In that 2022 season, he did sign a 3-year, $71 million extension off of his rookie contract that he will be going into the 2025 season on the last year of that extension. So the man wants his money. The man wants his money, and I think that there's even no guaranteed money into this last year. So I totally understand why he's sitting out, and the reason why I say that this is a Terry McLaurin saga, because while Terry McLaurin is coming off a career year in terms of touchdowns, having almost 1,100 yards with 82 receptions and 13 touchdowns in his first season playing with a real legit quarterback in Jaden. Contracts don't come with disclaimers. And while Terry McLaurin is Mr. Everything for the Washington Commanders, I think there's a tendency for this fan base to kind of hold him in higher ranks across the NFL than he actually should be. Last year I was out here, challenging if Terry McLaurin was a top 10 receiver. I'm not challenging that yet. I'm not challenging that anymore. I do fully believe that Terry McLaurin is a top 10 receiver, but giving him a contract through 2025 and past 2025 does come with some questions. Because Terry McLaurin's situation leaves us in a rather peculiar spot as, Washington Commanders fans, and, putting my GM hat on, me being Adam Peters in the Washington Commanders front office. Because as I mentioned before, while last year was his first year playing with a legit quarterback, and we all know that, we all understand that. Even last year, 1,100 yards, while Terry McLaurin did have a career year as far as touchdowns, 1,100 yards, and really, I'm selling them high, 1,096 yards, isn't necessarily a lot to write home about. And this is a guy that has never really cracked 1,200 yards receiving. So, when I'm talking about, Terry McLaurin, and you tune in to Bleeding BNG for the most raw, uncut, and unfiltered analysis on your Washington Commanders, I've always said that he's been challenging that top 12 list, but he's never going to be in that top 5 to me, because he just has some certain limitations in his game where it prevents him from being a Jamar Chase. It prevents him from being a Justin Jefferson. And that's perfectly fine because there's only 2 or 3 of those guys around the league. But I fully believe that Terry McLaurin is in that tier below. And that's why I believe that the man should be paid his money. And I'm going to go out and bury the lead and get out in front of it now. I do think that Terry McLaurin is going to be a Washington Commander past the 2025 season. I do think we ultimately paid Terry McLaurin during this offseason prior to the 2025 regular season. I do expect us to sign him to that extension. But as I mentioned before, it does come with some question marks. It does come with some question marks because if you look at the ranks of some of the guys, and I'm actually going to go ahead and pull up the top wide receiver contracts across the NFL, you see a guy like Jamar Chase topping out with 4-year, $161 million deal, averaging around $40 million per year, with Justin Jefferson coming in second at $35 million. CeeDee Lamb at $34 million, DK at around $33, AJ Brown at $32, and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Tyreek Hill and Brandon Ayuk around that $30 million mark, right? And if you look at these top 10 receivers that I've just mentioned, Terry McLaurin, if you look along the back half of those names, a guy like Brandon Ayuk and a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, I fully believe that Terry McLaurin is in that class of receiver. But if you step back and take a macroscopic point of view at this list, you'll look and see that outside of Tyreek Hill, Terry McLaurin is going to be the oldest wide receiver on this list going into his age 30 season, including some of the guys that he was drafted with in that 2019 draft class, like a DK Metcalf and an AJ Brown. And this is why I say that this puts the Commanders in a rather peculiar and interesting situation, because even when you talk about the 2 names that I just mentioned with a guy like AJ Brown and DK Metcalf, while I fully believe that, Terry McLaurin is a better receiver than DK Metcalf, and while I might give an edge or a lean to AJ Brown, I think that these 2 guys in Terry McLaurin or AJ Brown are more comparable than a lot of the nationwide NFL media. Some local guys, Grant Paulson, will even let on because, as I mentioned before, these guys came in the same draft class, and we've known that Terry McLaurin has played with the peanut gallery at the quarterback position. AJ Brown has only outpaced him by 600 yards in the entire duration of that career. And while AJ Brown hasn't played with Peyton Manning or Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes by any means, I would take Jalen Hurts, Shar Moore, Boris Kojo in a heartbeat, and the ghost of Ryan Tannehill over some of the quarterbacks that Terry McLaurin was dealing with. Do I need to talk about Taylor Heineke? Do I need to talk about Garrett Gilbert? Do I need to talk about Mark Sanchez? These are some of the guys. Or do I need to talk about Josh Johnson, who's back as a Washington Commander during the 2025 season? I don't know if he played with Mark Sanchez. I think Mark was only with us during the 2018 season with Terry coming in 2019. But the point still stands. He's playing with dog shit at quarterback. He's playing with guys at the talent level as me at the quarterback position. And for A.J. Brown to only be outpacing him and outproducing him by 600 yards in his career, I don't think that the talent level or the talent gap and the production gap is that far off. So we're looking at a future contract for Terry McLaurin. While I don't mind giving him around that $30 million per year average annual value, like the guys like A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tyreek Hill, and Brandon Ayuk are currently averaging, I would want it to be on a shorter-term deal due to him going into his age 30 season. Now, while Terry McLaurin is a unicorn and he's the best wide receiver that we've had, and this is something that I meant to touch on at the beginning of the episode before I went down this rabbit hole, I think us as Washington Commander fans, Washington football team fans, Washington Redskin fans, we have a tendency of overvaluing our guys because we're not really used to elite prospects, or post-2000s in the 21st century, we haven't had too many elite talents. So when we get a guy that's damn good, and in the better half or the better top half of the NFL at his position, we start throwing out that they the best receiver in the NFL, they the best running back in the NFL. And I'm a victim of it. I'm a culprit of it as well. I was in a lot of, extreme skins forums back in, blogs back then saying that Clinton Portis was a top 2 running back in the NFL and he was better than Sean Alexander, and LaDainian Tomlinson and things of that nature. But I learned. That was 8th grade, Jalen. But I've learned. And, just me looking at the NFL with a real macroscopic point of view and looking at the, entire horizon of the league, I've been able to realize, like, where our guys stand amongst the NFL. And Terry McLaurin, I'm saying it right now. Terry McLaurin is a top 10 receiver going into the 2025 NFL season. So that top 100 players of 2025 list, he better be on that list, and you better not be humming and putting him in the 90s. Not after the year that he had last year. And I think that he was starting to finally get some national respect and things like that. And all of these things go into, factors when we're negotiating contracts. What's your Q rating look like? Are you a pillar in the community, which I think Terry McLaurin is? And these are all the more reasons why I do ultimately think that we end up with a Terry McLaurin extension within the next coming weeks. Because while I do love Terry McLaurin as much as the next man, wide receivers tend to depreciate worse than a lot of the positions in football. Like, you got running backs, you got wide receivers, and you got cornerbacks. Those are the positions that seem to age the worst over the course of an NFL career. You seem to get 12 to 13 to 14-year careers out of defensive and offensive linemen and linebackers because they're not relying on their athleticism as much. They're not relying on speed, and they're not playing in as much space. So, him playing that wide receiver position way back in the day, that 30-year-old tag was a death sentence for running backs and receivers. And while I don't think that that's necessarily the case now with the evolution of medicine, I'm not going to fool myself into think that, Terry McLaurin is on the upward trajectory of his career. If we do sign him to this extension, whether it be 2 or 3 years, which I would be in favor of rather than a 4 to 5 year deal, if we could just get consistent Terry McLaurin play, if we could get 2024 Terry McLaurin play for the first 2 years of this extension, I think it's a win for both sides in my book. I think it's a win for both sides because 2024 Terry McLaurin was a $30 million receiver, $30 million a year receiver. Because I've mentioned, and I've only rattled off his regular season stats, Terry McLaurin scored in every playoff game that he played in last year. Terry McLaurin stepped up when he needed to step up the most. Terry McLaurin showed his clutch factor and showed why he's a staple in this organization and one of the foundational building blocks to this team. These are all the reasons why I do believe that an extension is going to happen. But just, educating my followers into saying that these are the reasons why he did miss this extension. This is why the extension hasn't happened, because this isn't a 100% shoe-in type situation, to say the least. Because while I've talked Terry McLaurin up for the last 13 minutes of this episode, he's not Jamar Chase. He's not Justin Jefferson. I would even argue that he's not CeeDee Lamb. I still think that Terry McLaurin struggles to run a double move. But he improved in that last year. He was able to play out of structure with an elite talent like Jaden Daniels, who's an incredible quarterback at extending the play and things of that nature. So if he can, pair himself with Jaden, if Terry McLaurin had played with Jaden Daniels since 2019, Terry McLaurin will be at the top of this list. I have no qualms about it. I have no doubts about it because he's just that type of worker. He's just that type of producer. But, if we're fifths, we would all be drunk. And that's just simply wasn't the case. So now that he's 30 and we're pairing him with the franchise right now, that golden boy, that guy right there on the wall, number 5, Down in the Burgundy, and go in Jaden Daniels. It sucks that that we're doing it over the back half of his career, what would be perceived as the back half of his career. But better late than never, right? Better late than never. And while I love Terry McLaurin as much as the next man, I think he's elite. We cannot just give him a blank check. So if you're a Washington Commander fan and you think that Terry McLaurin is on blank check status, I got bad news for you, champ. I got bad news for you. He is not. He is not on blank check status, but he is on elite wide receiver status. He is on top 10 wide receiver in the league status. And that's nothing to scoff at by any means. There's nothing to scoff at by any means. And I know, and I hate to be an ageist, because guess what? I turned 30 this year. So I sound a little crazy talking about this right now because I turned 30 this year, and I'm sounding like Terry McLaurin needs an AARP card. But y'all know y'all come to Bleeding B&G for the most raw, uncut, and unfiltered analysis. I'm letting you know what Adam Peters and that Washington Brass is talking about at the negotiation table with Terry McLaurin right now. They're talking about how he disappeared in his game against AJ Terrell. They're talking about how he pretty much was a no-show outside of the game-winning touchdown and, you know, the long bomb miraculous play that he had in the two matchups against Dallas. They're talking about how he was essentially a no-show against the Philadelphia Eagles. And it's up to Terry, who I don't believe is going to, but it's up to him to have no hard feelings, to remain an upstanding citizen and the positive role model that he is, and take in what these guys are doing, because that's the negotiation game. It's business at the end of the day. It's business at the end of the day. And while I love Terry McLaurin as much as the next man, I'm going to be a Washington Commander fan when Terry McLaurin long gone. I'm going to be a Washington Commander fan when Terry McLaurin is long gone. And I hope that he's able to ride out and finish his career with one club. But we know that often isn't the case in the NFL. Shit, Art Monk was a Jet. So we know, like, Ryan Kerrigan was an Eagle. So we know a lot of those fairy tales playing with one franchise like Dirk Nowitzki and Kobe in the NFL. We know that Tom Brady ended up being a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. Peyton Manning was a Bronco. So for all you guys that saying that Terry McLaurin can never be a Washington Commander, can never be another player on another team outside the Washington Commanders, y'all gotta untug those emotional strings, because it is business at the end of the day. It is football, and football is a dog-eat-dog world, especially when you're talking about business. And getting back to that age point, because I had to stop talking about me being 30, because I try to forget about it as much as possible. But Terry McLaurin, I will say this: he is a young 30. But he is 30. He is a young 30 because he was a rotational player throughout his entire tenure at Ohio State. Terry McLaurin stayed at Ohio State for 5 years. That's the reason why he's so much older than the guys that he came into the 2019 draft class with. But even in his 5th year, he was a rotational player then. Terry McLaurin was not the star wide receiver on that 2018 Ohio State Buckeyes roster. That was Paris Campbell. Terry McLaurin was a 3rd-round draft pick due to his special teams prowess. And while this may sound like a knock, and you know, one of the reasons why I'm not considering giving Terry McLaurin the bag, that's the furthest thing from the case. The reason that I'm bringing up this point is because Terry McLaurin broke out as a Washington football team player. He was a Redskin at the time. So I would like for him to finish his career as a Washington football team player, as a Commander. Because he's the epitome of success. He's the epitome of hard work. He's the epitome of perseverance. And I think he's the epitome of everything that it means to be a Washington football player. Dan Quinn and Adam Peters can't go out there and preach out anytime, anywhere, any place, and preach brotherhood and not sign Terry McLaurin to an extension. I don't see how those work. And to stick with my last point before I get you guys out and let you guys enjoy the rest of this Memorial Day weekend, this glorious Memorial Day weekend. One of the stats that I came across this last week, to kind of tie back to my point that Terry McLaurin isn't your typical 30-year-old. This is the 2024 chart of the 2024 receivers, receiving yard leaders by route type. And we see that Terry McLaurin led the entire league via the go route, and accumulating 384 of his damn near 1,100 yards via the go ball, via the 9 route. If you guys don't know what the 9 route is, what the go route is, it's just when the wide receiver runs by the DB as far as possible. It's a fly route. That's what they called it back in the day. It's the route that Randy Moss made famous. And I even tweeted it out a couple of days ago when I came across this tweet. I said, damn, Terry McLaurin really was the best deep threat in the league last year. Not bad for a 29-year-old. And one of the reasons why this list caught me a little bit by surprise is this showed that Terry McLaurin unlocked something that we hadn't necessarily seen from him since, I'd say like the 2021 season. If we can remember, Terry McLaurin put himself on the map as a deep threat receiver. First game of his career, 65-yard bomb, blazing Rasul Douglas against the Philadelphia Eagles. And he was pretty much a deep threat type of receiver with his first year with the Redskins at the time in 2019. And I thought he lost a little bit of that. I know he played a majority of the 2023 season with that turf toe injury, but I didn't think that he was beating people as deep as much as he was early in his career. Now, I didn't know if to cough it up to the turf toe injury. I didn't know to scoff it up to, him being closer and closer to 30, like we've touched on so much in this episode. But that elite quarterback in Jaden Daniels showed that, and him being 100% healthy showed that it wasn't Terry. It ain't been Terry all along. All you got to do is give Terry a guy that's capable of getting Terry McLaurin the ball, and Terry McLaurin's going to come down with that ball. Pause. We know what he does as a contested catcher. He has metrics out across, the entire NFL where he's the best contested catcher in the entire league. I think PFF had a list of the top 10 wide receivers going into the 2025 season based off their ranking. Terry made the top 10. I think he capped it off at the number 10. I added that ranking, even though they had A.J. Brown at number 1. I don't know where the fuck that came from. Jamar Chase is the best wide receiver in this league. But yeah, I hope Terry McLaurin comes back. I do think we ultimately re-sign Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin deserves to retire in the burgundy and gold, in my personal opinions, but I'm a little emotional. And that's why I'm a YouTuber and not a GM. But hopefully we're able to re-sign Terry McLaurin because, as I've said, he's still the best wide receiver on this roster. And something that I forgot to mention. Let me go back to it really quickly. But going into the 2025 season as of right now, Terry McLaurin not even the highest paid wide receiver on this roster. That title goes to Deebo Samuel. And I know he's only edging him out by about $500 or $600,000 or so $1,000. But hey, second place is second place. If you're not first, you're last. Word to Ricky Bobby. And we know that Terry McLaurin is the best wide receiver on this roster. Deebo Samuel's more of a gadget player. I think he has the capability of being the most explosive player on this roster. But as far as a traditional X wide receiver, which Terry McLaurin is, which I think is also another pin in his cap, because some of those guys on that top 5 list, that top 10 list that I mentioned, like Amon-Ra St. Brown and CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson, they run to the slot. They run to the slot when they're not getting it done on the boundary. And I can't really say that is the case for Terry McLaurin. I ain't seen him in the slot since Jay Gruden, since Ron Rivera and Scott Turner. I think he needs a couple more routes in the slot, especially if you want to unlock his game later in his career, kind of like what Kyle Shanahan did with Santana Moss. So that'll do it for this episode. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about this Terry McLaurin saga. Do you want him to play out this contract and us not sign him to an extension? Do you think Terry McLaurin is on blank check status, or do you want to sign him but at a cost? You know where I stand. As I said at the beginning of this episode, flood the comments. Let me know where you stand. And as always, if you're not following us on social media, what are you doing? Our Instagram is at BleedingBNG, BleedingBNG, right there. Our X handle is at BleedingBNG, BleedingBNG. Only one G in our X handle, so it's spelled a tad bit differently. If you're listening to us on audio-only platforms such as Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave a ranking. Please leave a review. That's how we finesse these algorithms so that when you're searching anything Washington Commanders, Bleeding BNG is that #1 content hub that pops up in your search bar. And yeah, I appreciate you guys tapping in. More content to come. We in the dog days of the off season, but Bleeding BNG ain't stopping. We pushing out that content. I'll check in on y'all on the flip side. Peace.